Welcome to a live episode of The Independent. I'm Pete Sampson, joined as always by my co-host Matt Fortuna, but instead of him being in Chicago, he's in my dining room, and I'm upstairs as we have to observe the two-screen, two-room rule of live podcasting. But Matt and I are back from Notre Dame's opening practice of training camp. Spoke to Marcus Freeman for about 20-plus minutes afterwards. We saw 15 periods of practice, and Matt, I will just throw the floor open to you. Caught your attention on day one?
Yeah, I feel like trading places a little bit right now. I kicked you out of your locale. Very typical first day of practice. It did feel a little bit like they were making more of an effort to go 11 on 11 with the ones versus ones and twos versus twos than in a typical practice, at least this early on. And of course, we're running to our notebooks trying to keep track of the roster changes and who's in which position and whatnot. The biggest takeaway for me from first period to the end was Benjamin Morrison not have a red jersey on. He's the best player on this team. He looked like he was a full go. I know Marcus Freeman said afterward they're easing him a little bit. And Riley Leonard moved well. They didn't move him around too much outside the pocket as far as running the football. But again, he looked like a quarterback who was healthy, who had no limitations on him. And you wrote about it. I know you asked Marcus Freeman about it afterward, the balance of splitting reps with the QBs. I mean, I didn't see anyone outside of him and Angeli take a single snap with the offense. I mean, they all got some individual work on the side. But anytime they were doing team drills, it was the Riley Leonard and Steve Angeli show.
Yeah, as I would expect Leonard to be a heavy dose of all things him this week or this month. And I thought that I'm not going to read really anything into what I saw from the quarterbacks today, other than like who took reps and when. And it was a lot of Leonard. Like he was fine. He missed a really open deep shot, I think, to Chris Mitchell when they were doing a little bit more one-on-one type stuff, or could have been 7-on-7. But it didn't look like a guy who had thrown 40-plus career touchdowns. It looked like more like a guy who hasn't played in a little bit more than a year. And that will be a big part of training camp for Notre Dame, to get Riley Leonard back up to speed, because he's going to need it, frankly. I don't think there's any concern about it. Like you said, he moves around. But when I sat down with Mike Denbrock on Monday, I said, when I talked to Duke's former OC, he described Leonard as a developmental passer. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. That doesn't mean he can't develop over the course of the next 4 weeks, but how Leonard sees the field. I mean, there were a handful of times where like he couldn't find the open guy, tucked it and ran. Like that's bad in the sense that like you want him to find the open guy, but good because Riley Leonard tucking it and running is usually a very effective play. So probably not a ton to read into quarterbacks. I think that the guy that after Morrison being available, considering he's an All-American, the guy whose role sort of stuck with me the most was Emil Wagner. And Denbrock maybe tipped that to me on Monday when I asked him about the offensive line. He said he really likes the two young tackles. And I found it strange that he would like a guy who was running second team, as I thought Emil Wagner would. But, he comes out first team offensive line. Both he and Charles Jagusah wearing 59 because Jagusah grabbed the wrong jersey. But if you had to rank which 59 was better, it was Emil Wagner. And I thought he did a really nice job. It wasn't a rotation with Tosh Baker at all, which that was another surprise. Is he big enough to hold up in the run game the way they need him to, against maybe a bigger pass rusher that you're not going to see a lot of? I don't know. But in terms of just being an athletic looking tackle, he checks a lot of boxes. So I'll be curious to see if the line we saw today is the line moving forward. Jagusah and Wagner at tackle, Craig at center, Shrouth at guard, and then the competition between Pat Coogan and Rocco Spindler for the other guard, which I would say that Spindler started in front, but it's a long camp, and that seemed to be the most open of the offensive positions, where like a true starter is what you're looking for.
Which is a little odd, just because Coogan's the only guy who started the opener last year who's back for this year, if I'm not mistaken. Certainly Emil Wagner coming out with the ones and shining the way he did was the biggest impressive surprise for me. And I asked Marcus Freeman a little bit about him, and he was kind of matter of fact about it. Maybe it was just something they didn't really want to like pump up publicly behind the scenes, but he didn't sound surprised by it at all. I also asked him the balance of getting this offensive line ready against this defense. I mean, we knew it was going to look one-sided. It did to a certain extent. I thought more so on the second team's 11s versus 11s
Yeah.
than the first team. Second team defensive line got a lot of pressure. The shotgun snaps to Steve Angeli seemed to be an issue. Again, we're talking about second team's first day of
I think
fall
I would
practice.
say this is the 24th straight year where the second team defensive line overpowered the second team offensive line.
Well, the other part, I mean, they mix and match a lot more on the first team
Yeah.
defense, especially at linebacker and in the secondary. It was tough to keep up with how many guys were coming in there. I was a little surprised Jordan Clark didn't get more work. But again, we saw a lot of different bodies back there in the secondary. Chance Tucker, a number of different guys. Tucker got beat pretty badly by, I want to say it was Micah Gilbert on a deep ball where he was holding his shoulder pad, and Gilbert responded by dropping the next gimme ball right in the middle of his chest on the next play. Yeah. But there was some stuff to like about the deep passing game. And again, we're overanalyzing this with the first practice. But Morrison got beat on one, I want to say, by Greathouse.
Jaden Thomas got him. And that's like I came out of the practice and I always sort of just tweet out, hey, players that impressed me for one reason or another. Sometimes it's they played well. Sometimes it's they're available. Benjamin Morrison impressed me because he was available. I wasn't sure what we were going to see with him today. So that was really significant. How they moved the receivers around. That was interesting to me. I watched early in practice the way sort of how they rep guys and in what order. That tells you a little bit something about like who fits where and like who the coaches trust necessarily. In the first group was Jaden Greathouse, Deion Colsey, Jaden Thomas. Second group, Micah Gilbert, Chris Mitchell, Jaden Harrison. And then you didn't get down to Bo Collins until the fourth group, which I don't think he will stay with very long. But it's just a much better collection of receivers that Mike Brown has to work with than anything Chancey Stuckey had, and probably anything Del Alexander had for the most part. They have material at that position. And I'm probably biased because Mike Denbrock said like he felt like Jaden Greathouse has a chance to sort of be an alpha type receiver, but the way you see him move in and out of breaks, it's like the shifty slotness of Faison or Fink, but with some real power to him too. So Jaden Greathouse, I think a worthy jersey switch to number 1, even though it took me a minute to figure out Logan Saldate is the new number 19. So interesting group of receivers, I think, that Mike Brown and Mike Denbrock will have a chance to work with that, frankly, the program just did not have last year at all.
No, definitely. I think they stood out in the sense that they didn't stand out the way they normally do, and not necessarily for the best reasons. I mean, I think they're 11 deep there scholarship wise, and it's hard to look at what we saw today, and look at that roster and think they've got to set, first team, second team, third team, because they're going to mix and match a lot, to the point where, Marcus Freeman was asked afterward about Jeremiah Love and his ability to play the slot. And how do you fit him in that way when you've got a loaded backfield and you've got other receivers who are starting in that role right now? And he gave the typical coach answer of, you don't need to be a rocket scientist to get the ball, to know you got to get the ball to Jeremiah Love's hands, and I'm sure they'll find a way to get the best 11 on the field, and yada, yada, yada. But it was interesting to see just the depth at that position. Again, I know Michael Floyd's walking through that door right now, but it was, there was a play with the second team where Angeli's about to get crushed. He gets rid of the ball. Donovan Hyannish tips it. Normally, that's bad news. It's a pick six or something bad happens. Bo Collins comes out of left field, scoops it up, catches it. Didn't go for much, but again, I haven't seen that kind of heads-up playmaking from this receiver group in quite some time around Notre Dame, so that was definitely encouraging.
Yeah. By the way, if you're with us on the live show and in the comments, please throw out a question. Yes, Mark, I do resemble Rob Hunt, not the first person who has told me that, but we'd love to work some questions from our listeners into the show to go with sort of what Matt and I saw today. If you have questions about what we saw or what we think, or how we interpret what was said, fire away. But I think that one thing that I tried to get into Marcus Freeman with afterwards, and like I don't know if I asked it exactly the way that I would get the best answer, but just like the pace of camp, because I think in year one, every day was a Super Bowl. You lose Cam Hart, you lose Jared Patterson. Year two, you don't have Ohio State to start, but you're very available going into Navy. And I know, I'm not asking this blindly. This is something that I've heard from some people connected to players that the pace of camp was so much different last year. Maybe that's less opponent driven and more we overdid it for Ohio State. But 15 periods today. It's pretty hot, pretty sticky out there. It's how they sort of pace things over the course of the next 3 weeks will be interesting to me in terms of how hard they go. Not because of the heat at A&M, which will probably resemble how it is in South Bend right now, but just making sure that when you get off the plane in College Station, that you have as available a roster as humanly possible. Because Benjamin Morrison, Mitchell Evans, part of that availability story. So that is interesting to me to see sort of where that goes and how he sort of fights the Tressel-ish urge to like grind, because that's how he was taught when he was coming up. It's just not the smart football way to do it, I think, in 2024.
Yeah, I mean, I think the heat will be a bigger I mean, it'll be worse than it was here today. And today was no picnic as far as the humidity, but it's going to be worse down in Texas. It just is.
Oh, yeah.
And it's going to be hard to replicate the emotional intensity that I think any program in its first game with a new head coach at home is going to have. I mean, by no means the same talent level, but I always think back to that 2019 Louisville game, which we all thought Notre Dame would walk in there and win that game by 4 or 5 touchdowns. And I think they found themselves trailing, if I'm not mistaken. It was, if not 14-0, 14-7, but the kind of galvanizing effect of a team coming off a bad year and with new energy is certainly inspiring to everyone there. And I don't know how you prepare for that, but I do think they need to strike the right balance of, again, not getting hurt during this camp, prepping probably harder than they did for Navy. I know Marcus Freeman said he didn't prep less because it was Navy, and I'm not sure he answered the question the way either of us hoped he would, but
yeah.
There is a balance there. It's going to be different with a new strength coach. The fact that none of those guys we had questions about came out in red jerseys today and seemed to be full go for the most part. Even Evans was out there running with the ones on the first tempo drill. The fact that we saw that with our own two eyes, I think, is very calming, because they're not putting these frontline players out there just for us. They're not putting them out there if there's any hesitancy about what they can do. Even Riley Leonard, he was asked about, what he did this summer, and he said, cut it loose. Like he can do whatever he wants now. He's free. Part of why we're going to see more of him than we would, with a normal quarterback rotation. Also, he did get asked, Marcus Freeman got asked, like, when do you plan to name a starting quarterback?
I think it's already been done.
Well, he didn't say it, and it was just funny because, like, it's one of those things you almost take for granted in this grad transfer world of, yeah, we're recruiting you to start. But I guess that's an announcement that will come at some point in some kind of official capacity.
Yeah, I think this is probably a good question from Jeremy Wahile. And he says, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being very concerned, how concerned are you about Riley Leonard's accuracy? 4. He did have a really nice deep ball that I think was to Bo Collins in one-on-ones, but I don't think like natural accuracy is going to be the best or second best part of his game. I think that he is going to be a very productive college quarterback, and maybe efficient college quarterback, but I'm not sure he's going to go out there and complete 75% of his passes. And it's hard to judge accuracy on day one, in part because he's still sort of figuring out where the ball needs to go and when it needs to go there, which is very natural for July 31st for a guy who missed all of spring practice. I would say, like, if we got a second look at Riley Leonard and it was August 20th and he looked like he did today, I'd be like, I don't know. But on day one, I wouldn't really put anything into his performance today that would make me concerned. But I don't think he's going to go out there and complete 75% of his passes either.
Yeah, I definitely lower than 5. It's not an actual concern, in the sense that it's something that I think is going to affect them in the regular season. He won. I think he won the long toss at Manning. He won something there.
Yeah, he can chuck it.
Long toss. And I think the touch, if it's not there already, will get there. I thought there was one play where they loaded the box, blitzed him. He ran a nice misdirection play, chucked it the other side to Jaden Greathouse, on a, it was almost like a delayed bubble screen, so to speak, that he's able to get out
Hmm.
there before getting
Oh yeah,
touched. And
yeah.
again, I thought that was nice. I didn't come away with any concerns from him. Again, that defense is really good. They mix and match a lot of different bodies there throughout the course of the first teamers. And again, you're going to have a lot of first teamers playing with the second team. First team caliber players played the second team on that defense. I didn't come away with any real concern for Riley Leonard. In fact, again, I was relieved to see him not being inhibited by anything physically.
Yeah, I thought that screen was like that's a good show of I think where his accuracy can be great. It's the throw where you really have to be an athlete as a quarterback, where you're not just sort of sitting back there and ripping it. Off balance screens, that kind of thing. I think Riley Leonard could be dangerous. Yeah, I would say like next question. How about we go to it's kind of impossible to answer, but we'll throw Irish Steel 63 in there anyway. How would you compare Denbrock's offense with the last few years? And I don't know if he means the last few years of Mike Denbrock or the last few years of Notre Dame, but let's, for the sake of discussion, how about the last few years of Notre Dame?
Yeah, I mean, it's felt like I was transported back to 2015 when I was out there today because he has the same voice. He's very loud. He's very
Yes.
vocal. He's a healthy blend, I think, of like the best parts of Chuck Martin, the best parts of Brian Kelly, without any of the demeaning parts. Like he's very loud. He's very demanding. You know where he is on the field at all times. And that was, I'm trying to think. I mean, I was at least one practice last year, and I don't remember any like. Not that this is indicative of anything, but I don't remember hearing like Jared Parker's voice or anything like that. But I mean, Denbrock's here in business. Like this is his third
Hmm.
time here. He knows there's a sense of urgency with this quarterback we didn't really get a chance to work with this program and everything that it's set up to do this season. He got on them. Marcus Freeman got on them too if they weren't running back to the huddle. Like I heard words coming out of certain coaches' mouth that I didn't know they were capable of. And again, I don't mean that in a demeaning way. It was refreshing to hear. And Denbrock's Denbrock. Like, he hasn't changed all that much, and I think that's a good thing. And I think he's a guy that Riley Leonard and this offense is going to respond to very, very well.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. See other questions. We jump there. How about Joe? Is it now or never for Jalen Sneed? Is he ready to assume an increased role? Marcus got asked about sort of the linebacker mix and match today. If today was purely indicative of about how they're going to play linebackers, it was probably not a good one for Jalen Sneed because Jack Kaiser was working at the will and not the mic. So if you have Drake Bowen and Kingston Viliama-Asa at the mic, sort of in the middle of the defense, Jack Kaiser is going to be next to them. If that's the case, then that limits the amount of opportunity that Jalen Sneed may have. He was running mostly with the twos today. I think it's a good group of linebackers. Jaden Osbury sort of as a rover nickel to kind of round it out. But I think you've got essentially Kaiser, Sneed, Viliama-Asa, Bowen, and then Osbury. I don't know if I'm missing anybody there, but like those, I think those would be the 4.5 Notre Dame would roll with into a game. But it's very difficult for me, especially at A&M, to see Jack Kaiser not on the field for 90% of the snaps. I just don't think you're going to roll the dice on that in week one. So that for Sneed, maybe there's more of a sub package role for him. I'm not really sure how they'll use him. Certainly has got a unique skill set, but again, it's like you have to have Kaiser just stitch the whole thing together at that position. I don't think Al Golden is going to stray too much from that this season. It's certainly not early.
What's interesting to me was I had not heard this stat before, but Tim Priester, our colleague, asked Marcus Freeman a question and prefaced it with, out of your 12 opponents this year, USC is the only one that returns less experience than you. And I never would have thought that because we've talked so much about how experienced this
Yeah.
defense is in particular and how good this team should be this year. And there's Phil Steele, there's Athlon, et cetera, et cetera. I think there are a lot of different ways to measure experience now because
Yeah.
it's not like
And I'm not sure that includes Leonard,
right,
Hurd,
Oben.
I'm not sure those guys are included in that group.
I would imagine they don't because again they've got multiple fifth and sixth year guys who are
Yeah.
coming and started multiple years at other schools. So it was interesting to hear it phrased in that regard. Even Marcus Freeman was like, "Is that like?" He kind of said like, "Oh, really? Like just USC?"
Yeah.
But I say all that to say I'm with you. I don't think Kaiser's going to come off the field much at least. some of the conversation I had with people coming into camp was, we love this defense. There are a lot of new faces. We're glad we have Al Golden. We're glad we have Jack Kaiser because he speaks that language and he's going to get these guys up to speed. And you even heard Marcus Freeman, maybe in his opening statement, say, "Look, Al Golden from day one can teach at a 500 level course with this group because of the experience we have." And I think you're going to see that early on.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was, you sort of got into it with Marcus, and I would like to sort of ask a similar question to Golden. Is like, Al Golden probably would love to coach at a 500 level all camp. I don't think the offense is ready to receive, a 500 level test. So, how do you manage and marry like what's good for the offense, what's good for the defense? Those might not be the same thing. What's good for the team is sort of the happy medium there, and you sort of have to figure that out. Yeah, I guess in terms of other questions, I don't know if this is going to be super topical, but we did talk about Jeremiah Love, Regine. Who's the number 3 running back August 31st, in your opinion? Today, I would have thought Aeneas Williams with Keedron Young afterwards. And, but I think it's worth remembering Keedron Young missed all of spring practice basically with a hamstring. When I watched him go through drills, he looks like kind of a lighter Robert Hughes. I didn't watch him at all in spring because he was out, but he is very well put together. I just think that there is going to be a huge gap, and this is a good thing, between Love and Price and anyone else. And even Price today, I think he hurdled Amral Mukum on like a run play where he was like on the ground with whoever was trying to block him on the offensive line, just skip through the hole. I think Love will be outstanding, and Price is really good too. After that, and I think it's another way to look at that. Who's your number 3 back? Really, it's probably Riley Leonard, because at the end of the year when we look at total carries, it wouldn't shock me if Leonard had more than Price. So I think that's probably how you got to look at the run game a little bit differently in terms of usage this year, because you have a quarterback who's really a threat. And again, that's like, if accuracy we're thinking like 4 out of 10, 5 out of 10, mobility we're thinking 10 out of 10 on Riley Leonard. I think that's his escapability, athleticism in the open field is, to me, still underrated. Because it's just very difficult to capture how good he is in that kind of position, because it's not, he's just like slippery and strong at the same time. It's difficult to be both at once.
He is, and he's a head first runner too, who's hard to bring down, which maybe that is why he's got hurt so much. I don't know, but it's something you like to see in your quarterback, that level of toughness. But he's a guy, we've said this before, stats are not how you're going to judge Riley Leonard. It's not how you judge him right now. If you looked at the box scores from his time at Duke, you think, what's so special about this guy? But clearly he makes a huge impact on the field, and I think he's going to be a really good quarterback for Notre Dame this year if he stays healthy. Here's one from Liam Duggan. This is the best wide receiver group since, I would say, at least 18, when they had Claypool and Boykin.
Boykin together,
I mean, nothing post 18, I think. I mean, they
barely had a receiver group since 18. It's they just haven't had bodies.
And Komet.
Yeah, they just didn't have bodies to put out there the last couple of years. It's this is not an off season where they would have, like, I realized they took 3 grad transfers, and Ben Skowronek has played in the NFL for a little bit. I'm not sure that all 3 aren't better than Skowronek. I think that they have upgraded that position. Bo Collins, just to tease it a little bit, like when Bruce Feldman's Freaks List comes out on next week, like keep an eye out for Bo Collins on that. He had a great offseason, and he looks good in a Notre Dame uniform. The number 5 is very slimming for him in the same way that it is for Boubacar Traore off the edge. But I think, Bo Collins had a great great final season of 45 catches for 722 yards and 4 touchdowns. Like, I think that would be outstanding. I think Notre Dame would take that on a heartbeat. I think is completely capable of delivering at that level.
And he wasn't doing it on this, bang, bang, elite Clemson offense that we've become accustomed to seeing in recent years. And similar, they struggled at quarterback, they struggled at offensive line. He kind of became the go-to guy there. I could easily see him replicating, even surpassing that production this year. at Notre Dame. You mentioned Boubacar, by the way. I had the exact same thought when I saw him walk in. So I did a double take. I'm like, that's not Bo Collins, but it does not look like your typical defensive lineman. He definitely is a scary looking dude. I'm putting this one in here just for you, Pete. I feel like this is a Pete special.
Oh, were there any Kevin Smith spring practice 2020 or Brandon Wimbush throwing into the net observations from today that impacted your outlook for players of the 2024 season? No. I would say
was Kevin Austin on them in 2020? I feel like 19 was the last year.
Nope, he was.
Okay.
He was phenomenal, and then a global pandemic shut the whole thing down. I would say if you could eliminate one really bad shanked punt, James Rendell was incredibly impressive today. There were a couple that he hit 50, 55 yards with a lot of, not a little hang time, a lot of hang time. That is one where like, all right, I get sort of the optimism here about him picking up where Notre Dame hoped that he would, like, even though he's never played American football. So that might be one. I mean, the guy, Chance Tucker really struggled today. I mean, but he's not your starting cornerback. But it was enough that Marcus Freeman was asked, do you have to get a freshman ready to play at corner? And he's like, absolutely. We have to get one of those to go. So maybe that is significant, just not in the same way that the accuracy issues were in 2018.
So I'm with you on Rendell. I mean, some of those are from 60, and that sounds like a different ball when it comes off his leg. Like, it is boom. Twice he outkicked Greathouse, who was returning, and one of them Greathouse bobbled and fumbled while running back to get it. But he outkicked his coverage twice there, literally speaking, and it was very easy to see in that limited time why these guys are very excited about him and why they traveled overseas to go and get him. One from We Are Not Marshall. That's an interesting name. How many practices will occur before the coaching staff will realize they're deficient in areas and can it be fixed before the start of the season? Less than one, because I think they knew what they have. They know what they're good at, and they know what they could improve upon early on. And again, I think the tug of war, if you will, that me and Pete have been talking about is how to judge this offensive line and this offense when they're going up against a 500 level defense that is extremely deep at multiple different levels. And that is more often than not, especially in the trenches, going to get the best of them against a quarterback who has not really gone through a spring ball with this offense.
Yeah, I think that in some ways we kind of have answered this question in a roundabout way earlier in the pod. I think that they realize that at corner right now with the Tucker / freshman moving up conversation. I think they realize that at right tackle, where they didn't wait to get Emil Wagner in there because Tosh Baker was older. They just went with him. That I thought was like, besides Morrison being there, was the most significant thing. Like I thought that Wagner would start games this year, but it was going to take some rough performances for the staff to make a move. Like, to get ahead of that game, I think it looks easy and smart, but I think it's hard to do, especially at a position where experience at a already very inexperienced group, you would probably want as much of it out there as you could get. Wagner doesn't have any of it, but they feel like he's got a little bit more quickness and athleticism that they can be better at that spot. Kingston Viliama-Asa getting reps with the ones. I don't think that they're sort of waiting because they have older Mike linebackers. I think there were times where Christian Gray was repping ahead of Jaden Mickey. I don't think that they're waiting just because Jaden Mickey has played more. I think that Gray is a superior athlete. Rod Hurd, Adon Schuler, I don't think that really fits this category necessarily, but I thought Adon Schuler looked good today, and that probably backed up what kind of offseason he had, because Marcus Freeman said both are going to play a bunch. So we'll see, but I don't feel like this staff is wired or they're predisposed to like need a loss or need a setback to make a change. I think that they had a pretty good idea of who they got, who they don't, strengths and weaknesses. And, I thought you saw them move forward today with the kind of thing sometimes it takes a couple weeks to get to.
Another one right up your alley. Rating Emil's day on a scale of 1 to Kyle Hamilton. Boy, I didn't think we'd be having those comparisons an hour after the first practice of
No,
fall camp, but
he wasn't. Look, we're not talking. He's not Joe Alt out there. But like he had a good day. He handled RJ Oben multiple times, and that was impressive to me. Like RJ Oben is a good college football player, and Emil Wagner did a nice job against him. So that is a real positive. Is he going to do that every day for the next 3 weeks, 4 weeks? I don't know. We're not going to be there to see it. But in terms of day one, it was good. Kyle Hamilton, that is beyond great. 3 picks in your first college practice, but very
and a sign of what was to come.
A harbinger of what was to come.
Yeah, he was just, I don't know the number. He was very high on that NFL 100 they just put out. This one's also for you since you're currently Rob Hunt.
Yeah, isn't it true that Riley Leonard surgically repaired with the plate is harder to break than his natural ankle? And he just had the wrong size plate put in the first, not second injury. I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I'm a sports writer. However, when I talked to Leonard and we were talking through the injury, he's like, "Yeah, I just got a bigger plate put in the second time." I think he's also smarter with his rehab. I asked him like, "So no basketball this summer?" And he's like, "No basketball this summer." And I know after the first one, he had a basketball in his hand at some point between surgery 1 and surgery 2. I'm not saying that's the reason anything happened, but yeah, I think that the ankle should be stable. He is insistent that it is. There weren't any signs today that it wasn't in terms of braces or that kind of stuff. So overall, I think that you would feel pretty good about Marcus Freeman's take about cut it loose. And I think that we saw today was a quarterback who was able to kind of cut it loose a little bit.
Just put a finer bow on that. Also for Michael, Dallas fan and DC1 Campbell. Yeah, no, it's a qualifier for him because he was hurt last season and because he's at a new school with a new offense coordinator and did not really get the full kind of spring practice. So yes, I think yes, obviously everyone wants to be healthy. I think we monitor him a little bit closer, just given everything that's been invested in him so far.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I think that will be an ongoing sort of thing to watch all season. That is not necessarily fair or unfair. I think it is what it is. Your starting quarterback has to be healthy, as Michael Dallas fan and DC1 Campbell sort of intimates there. If Notre Dame has to go to Steve Angeli, I'm not saying the offense would collapse, but it would be completely different than the one that Mike Denbrock wants to run. So that's sort of where they are with that. There was a question earlier about CJ Carr. I can't remember who asked it. Like he was almost exclusively like scout 4th team today. So it was not a pickup where you left off in spring because he wasn't given the opportunity to pick up where he left off in spring. That gets back to you need Riley Leonard to get these reps. You brought him in to win the job. And whether you just admit that he's won the job or not, like he is your starting quarterback going to Texas A&M. And I think Notre Dame is completely fine with that.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I just wonder how long they will split the reps, so to speak, with the 1 and the 2, with Leonard and with Angeli. Obviously, it's clear Leonard's going to be a starter. We're not trying to create anything here, but I was impressed with what I saw from Angeli out of the bowl game. I know that's not indicative necessarily of what he's going to be under Mike Denbrock, but I think keeping him ready, keeping him engaged. I was very impressed that all these guys stayed. I thought just with the numbers game alone, there'd be at least one post-spring departure. They went to their New York trip, and I'm sure, it was near and dear to Angeli's heart being from New Jersey, but, they had him there with Riley Leonard. He feels like as much of a frontline player on this team as some of the other guys do, despite the fact that he's probably not going to play much, if at all, if everything goes according to plan this season. But I do think they feel, whether they'll come out and say it or not, they feel about as good as they possibly can about a backup quarterback right now, better at least than they have at the bare minimum in Marcus Freeman's 3 years here.
Yeah. Reese Miller, because everything was eye test today. Question is, it's that time of year. Who are your top 5 off the bus versus Texas A&M? And there's a freshman that I would throw on this list in a heartbeat who didn't do anything in practice day because he's a freshman offensive tackle. But Gerby Lambert is a really, really impressive looking kid. Who else you got?
Yeah. Lambert would be up there. I think Bubakar would be up there.
I feel like he has to wear number 5 as well. Like if he's in his
if he's
jersey,
wearing
that
number
would
5.
Yeah.
RJ Elbin looked impressive to me. He just looked like he belonged, and obviously he's played a lot of football as well. Riley Mills, from a pure size standpoint, I mean, that guy's hard to miss when he's coming off the bus.
Mitchell Evans would make the cut for me. As a
Evans
tight
make
end.
the cut. Like,
he's imposing even by Notre Dame tight end standards.
Love the minute you see him with the ball in his hands, but I'm not sure if you see him just walking around, he's going to jump out.
I feel like
at you.
if you show up to your first practice with a hoodie as your underlayer, like you have to be good. You cannot show up with a hoodie and be bad.
But we got to say James Randall, right?
Oh yeah, James Randall would be up there too. I think, but in the same way, Bubakar would have to show up with wearing number 5. I think Randall, if he showed up like a tank top or something, he'd be like, "Oh, okay, who's this guy?" Like he's
like the rugby photos when you see.
Yeah, he's a good-looking athlete out there. He is unlike previous punters, pretty much all of them.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
let's go to
and it's Chad Williams. Shouts out Charles.
Oh, sorry.
He would be pretty high on my list too.
He'd be up there too. I was confused by the 259s when they were running at first, but it became very clear.
His attention to detail of the jersey grab was maybe not great, but it's first day for everybody.
Michael Dallas fan in DC, one Campbell. He's like saying that a lot. He keeps putting in questions. I keep hitting him without looking at the name, but they're good questions. Thanks, Sam. Jelly Athletic, very underrated for some reason. We have Kenny Mitchell who's been pointed out as the one. OC Mike Denbrock loves with the ball in his hand and running around. I mean, we saw a little bit of that in the spring game. I haven't talked to Denbrock enough to really know how he feels about that group behind Riley Leonard, but I do think Angeli is underrated, and I think athleticism-wise, we saw him do some things in that sun bowl that opened a lot of eyes, at least my eyes.
Yeah, I would say that one of the good things I could say about Angeli is like early in practice when they're doing it's essentially like 4 bags. It's a drill that you would equate with running backs, really, where you're just sort of like stepping right and left, and then boom, you have to drop back and throw it. If Leonard and Angeli weren't wearing jerseys, I'm not sure you would automatically be able to tell them apart in terms of who moves around best. I thought that both have some natural athleticism. Obviously, Leonard does, but I think Angeli is a better athlete than people give him credit for. But that's not to say that in the open field, I would bet on him to shake a linebacker the way that I would with Riley Leonard.
This goes hand in hand with the off the bus comment, but who's going to be the big hitter on defense? Irish Steel 63 is asking us, do you see his O-line being able to move the line of scrimmage forward like Freeman said he wants? We won't see that second part in camp. It's just, I don't think that's possible against this defense right now in its current state. Big hitter, I could see it being Rod Hurd. He's a guy I probably should have mentioned as far as off the bus. He's a physically impressive guy, a guy who's played a lot of football, and a guy who was playing was showing signs of blitz a lot. Like you'd see him out there and you're like, wait a minute, that guy's supposed to be a safety, right? At least during today. So I think that's a guy we could see making a big impact there. One name we have not mentioned at all during this, and I don't think came up at all with Marcus Freeman afterward, Xavier Watts, the reigning Bronco Nagurski Trophy winner. But he was probably the one constant out there who I did not see come off the field once with that first team when they were going 11 on 11.
Yeah. I agree with that. I do think Sneed and Kingston Viliama-Asa both have some like hit stick ability and probably a desire to use it. Like I don't think Jack Kaiser is going to like send you 5 yards backwards. That's not his game. Whereas I think Sneed is probably more of like a flash hitter type of player. I think Viliama-Asa has some ability that way too. So those would be the 2 guys that I would definitely mention.
Did Chad Williams, did Evans have a brace on? I don't think so. He might have.
Yeah.
I probably should have looked at that closer. When I saw him out there catching, all right, there's Mitchell Evans.
It's kind of one of those things where like once he's out there, you kind of move along. Freeman said he's got return to play protocol. Same thing with Morrison. But the big sort of point there is that both are good to go for Texas A&M. Essentially, when they go full contact in camp, I'm not clear about that, but that's probably not too far away and closer for both of them than maybe we would have thought a month ago.
This is a non-camp question, but I want to get in here because it's always a hot topic of discussion, Lucas Yohe. Hope I pronounced that right. Deuce Night updates. I asked Marcus Freeman last week when I got him on the phone. I said, I know you can only say so much, but generally speaking, how do you feel about NIL at the high school level? And Pete gave he kind of laughed a little bit, gave a very diplomatic look. It's happening. So like, we're just going to roll with it. Kind of his approach to everything college football. I got asked about roster limits and whatnot today. Headset communication. But he Freeman did say, if my kid gets to that level when he's in high school and that's something I got to deal with as a parent, maybe I'll give you a different answer. But right now, it's happening, and that's just kind of what we're dealing with right now. I don't know if you have anything else to share. In the actual recruitment.
Auburn. I've been told. I think the I can't was insane or crazy was the amount of sort of NIL funding that was being thrown Deuce Knight's way from somebody I talked to around Notre Dame. So it's like they got to deal with that. This is like NIL works in Notre Dame's favor in a lot of recruitments. Grad transfers, you're seeing NIL work in Notre Dame's favor. This might be one where it works against them, and that's part of it too. That doesn't mean NIL good, NIL bad based on the outcome, but it just Notre Dame is going to have to figure out a way to, as they always were going to have to do, get a kid from a small school in Mississippi to say, I want to go to Northern Indiana for 4 years, where I probably will have to sit for a couple behind CJ Carr, opposed to stay local, maybe an easier fit, and I could play right away or sooner. So it's Notre Dame's knew it was going to have a battle for Deuce Knight. They were always going to have a battle for Deuce Knight. I don't think what's happening right now with sort of visits and looking at other schools is too big of a shock, even if it is a frustration.
I mean, that's just an evergreen recruitment topic that I think we're going to have to monitor until December, whatever date it is. And that'll be a fun one as they wait for that fax to come in, as they prepare for a home playoff game, assuming they have that problem on December 19th or whatever the date is. But what you said, insane or crazy, I'm curious. Were numbers thrown to you behind the scenes? What qualifies as crazy and insane?
No, I have not seen the actual number. But yeah, that was just how it was described to me by somebody who would know. That could be a challenge. That's recruiting in 2024.
It's a strange world. I mean, I think it was a press release where Deuce, I forget the company, but he got that NIL deal. The company, and again, I'm blanking on the name here, and I'm paraphrasing, but the company CEO said something to the effect of, "We're not a charity, but it's great to give this life-changing money to someone who needs it." I'm thinking, all right, this is going to be an interesting business model going forward, like a lot of things when it comes to NIL and recruitment. But again, that's going to be one that's worth monitoring. I like this one from Fort Wombly's. Any sense of how many captains this team will have? What is the expected timeline on that? Who are some less obvious names that might be in the running? I do wonder how they narrow it down, just because it's such an old. Like I could see Riley Leonard not being a captain. Like I don't think, and I'm not saying like he's not qualified, but I don't think it's a situation like, well, we got to give it to Sam Hartman, because if he doesn't, you're just going to ask us. Like, he's a new guy. He missed all spring. There are a lot of 5th and 6th year guys on this team already. Like I'm not. This is not an indictment of his character or leadership. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that he might not be named the captain.
Yeah, I would say I think Riley Leonard will be a captain. So you look at the offense, you're like, who's going to be a captain here? They have 6 candidates on defense, and you have to work to find them on offense. So defensively, Mills, Cross, Kaiser, Watts, some collection of those guys.
Morrison.
I don't know if Morrison will, just be based on numbers. They could all. So that's difficult. I'd say the spirit of this question is like, could you name somebody that no one is mentioning as a potential captain? Ashton Craig would be the guy I would single out there. It's like this would be if there was a betting market on captains, you could probably get good. Yeah, where's Tim Murray when we need him? You could probably get good odds on Ashton Craig that would be worth investing in. Denbrock said to me is like, look, you want your center to be a good player, but you want him to be the best leader that holds everything together, and that's what we're getting from him. So I think that he's probably the guy I would say that's like outside of the obvious candidates who might be worth keeping an eye on moving forward.
Michael, again, you mentioned Bo Collins. That name crossed my mind. I do think it's probably a little more difficult when you haven't been here in the spring. But it
Yes.
wouldn't surprise me if he was named one because was he one at Clemson? I can't remember. They named him postseason there.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, that was Boca. I think the missing spring. He went with the fourth group of receivers, like when they're doing individual drills at the beginning of practice, and then bubbled up from there and made some plays. But I don't think Bo Collins probably comes into this as like somebody they're looking to be a captain. But as for Wombley's mentioned, Jaden Thomas maybe. Is he a potential captain? I don't. That could be an off the grid type of pick. I just think wide receiver is going to be so diverse in the number of guys who play there that I don't know if there's like a captain per se because
Mitchell Evans. Sorry, offense.
Oh yeah, of course, Mitchell Evans. Duh. That would be one. Thanks for clearing that one up. Yeah, that would make the most sense of all of them. So yeah, I think at wide receiver, it's wide receiver by committee, to use Denbrock's phrasing. Marcus Freeman said today, we're going to play 6 to 7. And I'm not sure, maybe Greathouse at the top. I'm not sure there's going to be a huge disparity in like snaps played necessarily among those 6 or 7 guys.
Quick one from Mark Juan. I'm glad they're not going to Culver. Staying home with facilities, good decision. I don't think they've gone there since COVID, and I don't think anyone in this post-Northwestern world outside of Wisconsin has been taking their camps off-site.
Right.
You see that in the NFL now, training camps for the most part are on site. The facilities are what they are. You invest all this money in them. I don't know why you would take them off-site.
You have the best.
I get why you did it. I don't know why you would now.
Yeah, you sort of have the best of everything that you possibly can have on campus at a time when campus is very, very quiet. I can understand the utility of getting away. It just seems like a logistical nightmare that you don't need to take on.
No, not at all. Chad Williams again. This offense will be more RPO than years past. True RPO, not the Ian Book RPO. Wink, wink. It will definitely be more of a true RPO than a years past. I think it would be foolish to bring in a guy like Riley Leonard and not utilize what to date has been his biggest strength, which is his ability to move with the football in his hand.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we'll see that, and I think you'll see. Mike Denbrock's offense, and again, it's personnel dictated. Mike Denbrock's offense, definitely at LSU, and to a lesser extent at Cincinnati with Desmond Ridder, was not really what his offense was at Notre Dame with Deshaun Kaiser, Malik Zaire. I don't think he was a coordinator when Tommy Rees was there, but it's personnel driven, and I think we've seen Deuce Knight tweet his recruitment pitches from Notre Dame when he's on campus, and he's had ones with pictures of Jaden Daniels in there. They're absolutely going to lean into Mike Denbrock's recent past, and Marcus Freeman and Gino have worked with that in the past at Cincinnati to great success.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the Leonard's mobility combined with the Love Price combo and then the mixture of receivers essentially turns every play into kind of a triple option almost, because you have the quarterback keeping it, give to the running back, or throw it. Why would you not lean into that? And like Mike Denbrock is sort of seen, and I think to help a defensive line, how do you slow down a defensive line? Like you make them read things out opposed to just getting after it. So I think that's one way schematically you can help a young offensive line grow, is like you just give them extra half beat by mixing in RPO. It's essentially like everything is a double play action. So that I think can help a lot. Chad Williams sort of referenced the bubble screens. That double, you referenced this sort of double screen concept we saw earlier today that went to Greathouse, that Leonard threw. Like I think it's a strength of Leonard. Again, it slows everything down for the defense. That's maybe not something they're going to need in week 6, but I think it's something they're going to need in week 1. They're going to have to schematically help the offensive line. Denbrock acknowledged that that's something that will be critical to where they're going. And I think that's kind of one of those solutions.
Mark Juan, this one's probably better for you, Pete, since I'm sitting in South End in your living room right now. But best place to park, whatever you can get, is what I would say in that regard, because even we've gotten kicked across the street, which I actually don't mind. It makes it easier to drive in and out from the city. But definitely, you said grew up South End West Side, been a long time. Yeah, you know better than I have, but I used to live here 10 years ago, and it was night and day
Yeah.
from what it is right now.
Yeah, Mark's curious about, yeah, sort of the first home game, the parking pass, what lot. I think it was recommended in the comments, the Compton lot. I think that's probably a good one where you're close to the action, but you can get your car out of there and find a parking spot. The It's like that those library lots used to be good, but there's all that construction over there. It's essentially a little bit more of a dead zone now. So I would say, look, the where the action is the Joyce and Stadium lots. I'm not sure that those are the lots you want to park in, but those are probably the lots you want your friend to park in to go to their tailgate. So if I was getting my own parking pass, and like, hey, even earlier in the season, Innovation Park, where they put the media, is pretty easy in and out. If you've got other tailgates to go to, and not that far from the stadium, you got to walk through all the stuff. But if you're going to the game, you probably want to be in the stuff. For people like Matt and I, we're trying to like get our credentials and get up to the press box, because the whole adult beverage thing is just not something on a work day in the morning, at least. Maybe the post game independent podcasts certainly have gone that route many times, but pregame not so much.
I like where they've actually put us in Innovation Park now, because it makes it for easier in and out, and it makes it easy to go. Like when we're on the other side, I like going to the other side of the stadium because that's where the parents' tailgates were. And you'd always see some people that were good to catch up with pregame. All your friends who you actually want to see and get jealous of because they're partying and you're working. We walk through all that, and so that makes that a little bit easier, for better or for worse. Irish Steel 63, please ask Coach Freeman how he plans to improve road performance this year. I feel like we've all not beaten around the bush, but asked some version of that question. I feel like even your question about finding the right balance of preparing for a big game versus burning these guys out it is hand in hand with that. I don't know if we're going to get an answer out of him publicly, at least.
No, I don't think we will either. I didn't put this in my Q&A with Denbrock because I want to save it for a future story, but I did ask about going on the road, playing in noise, what sort of things you have to account for, what you have to sacrifice. We talked about snap counts and motions and all that, and sort of the ins and outs of that. I thought, I don't know if they would have beaten Louisville if the game was in Notre Dame Stadium last year. Like they just didn't have it. I don't know how much being on the road had to do with that. And that was like, the game was essentially tied in the third quarter and then it collapsed. That may have been more an accumulation of Ohio State to Duke to Louisville. And your quarterback didn't play well, maybe in all of those games. So that, road game performance, were they great on the road last year? Certainly not. I think if you look at more of a micro point of view, how do you improve on the road in the Clemson game per se? You have an offense coordinator who can fix a broken game plan on the fly. I think they have one now. They didn't before. So I don't think that Notre Dame just sort of struggles on the road because it's the road. Look back to the Ohio State game from 2 years ago. They didn't lose that game because they played poorly on the road. Ohio State was just a lot better. Like, just from an execution standpoint, I think they maybe had one or two false starts and they were both on receivers, or maybe they had two offensive penalties in the game, both on receivers, an OPI and a false start. Like, I think operationally they did a very nice job on the road, in that environment. So last year's, I wouldn't put it down to like home, road, the differences. I think it's kind of one of those where like Notre Dame was just more not prepared to play, and it didn't necessarily matter what the venue was.
I'm with you, and let's face it, they have 3 true road games this year, Pete, and it's not like they're not going to be ready for the first one because they're putting all their proverbial eggs in that basket. Because against Texas A&M, 2 weeks after that, they play at Purdue, and then they don't play a road game until the regular season finale, USC, and that one's so far off, and it's always a hard one to predict because you just don't know what kind of shape or interest any team will have in their last game of the season, depending on how the season went. Georgia Tech in Atlanta at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Wouldn't surprise me if that was a 50-50 crowd. Not going to be a traditional home game for Georgia Tech. Obviously, the Navy game and the Army game are going to be heavy Notre Dame contingents, even though only one of them is technically a home game. So I'm with you. I don't think it's a road venue preparation shortcoming. I think it's a consistency week to week performance, and that's the interesting part about Louisville. I mean, I don't think it helped being on the road last year
No.
or being at night, but they weren't ready for that game. I don't think they're going to be ready for that game wherever it was. The question is, would Louisville have gotten as big of a shot in the arm coming to Notre Dame Stadium that week? But I do think that was a cumulative effect, not to excuse it. I mean, there's no excusing that performance, but I'm not sure the environment itself had a whole lot to do with that.
Yeah.
Last SEC road win was, I want to say, 04 Tennessee, right?
Yes, I was there for that. And that, I think it was like a top 10 Tennessee team against like a pretty bad Notre Dame team. And this is I remember all the orange. I also remember Michael Wilbot on PTI saying that I think my former colleague Tim Priester had called for Tyrone Willingham to be fired going into the game, which is not at all what he wrote, but that picked up some traction. It was like the editors of Blue and Gold Illustrated. So it's weird.
Viral before viral was a thing.
Yeah, viral before viral. It's weird to think back about the things you remember out of the blue from 20 years ago that just hadn't thought about that in about 15 years, but just jogged my memory.
Michael Dallas fan again. Mike Denbrock offense changed the Louisville game. Maybe. I mean, I do think there was a sense of flying the plane as they were learning to build it last year with that offense. Just given the kind of mismatch of bringing in a transfer quarterback, promoting a guy internally who was not their first choice at OC. I do like when they got down last year, whether it was Louisville or Clemson. And I know you mentioned Louisville game was closer through three quarters than we remember it. I always get this sense watching games, not just Notre Dame games, but like there are games where you might be a touchdown away and you'll watch an offense and you just think, boy, like if they don't get a pick six or something, like they got no chance in this one. Penn State, Michigan last year. I think that was a 9-point game, but it felt so much more because you knew Penn State's offense was never going to do anything. I do think when they fell behind in games last year, there wasn't a whole lot of at least external faith, and watching it on the field unfold didn't seem like there's a whole lot of internal faith of we're going to figure this thing out outside of that last drive against Duke. I did not get the sense at Clemson when they fell behind early, they really had a realistic shot of coming back, even on that last drive when they had a chance. And Louisville, it just never seemed like it felt like they were playing a step behind the whole time. And I do think having a veteran OC like Mike Denbrock will, there's not going to be that feeling. Doesn't mean they're going to make all the right plays and that they're going to win those games, but certainly it's not going to have that quicksand feeling.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's Denbrock had I asked him, can you give me an example of, a time in your career where you had to throw a game plan out in the first quarter because the defense did something else? And he's like, yeah, actually the last game I coached at LSU. So they played A&M, coaching staff had been let go. A&M came out and only ran third down defense on first and second down in addition to third down. And he was like, it really took us a minute to sort of figure out how do we get back to what we want to do. We got to stop what they're doing before we can get back to what we want to do. They went 3 and out on 2 of the first 3 drives, scored a touchdown between, and I think they finished the game with 4 touchdown drives in their final 5 series. They were down 10 points at one point in the third quarter, and I want to say they won by 12. So it's like it was definitely a moment where they really turned it around. And they had to sort of play A&M's game for a second, and before they grabbed control of the game. I thought Jared Parker did a good job of that at NC State last year, but that was the only example, and that game had some really strange circumstances associated with it. What Denbrock has done this many, 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 many times over. So I have a lot of confidence that he'll be able to do that. If the game plan doesn't work initially, I think he'll be able to find punches and counter punches pretty quickly.
The other part I would add to that is, when Sam Hartman was bad, he was bad, and that was the knock on him his whole career. Like he didn't have like, all right, I threw a pick today. It was boom or bust in a lot of games for him.
Right.
I mean, he had 3 or 4 4-pick games at Wake Forest in the final couple of years. He had the 5-pick game against Louisville, and I think 3 picks against Clemson. Look, I can't get anyone's head. I don't want to speak for anyone, but like watching it from the side, like it was a familiar pattern. Like, all right, here we go again. Not saying Riley Leonard's going to be the cure-all. He hasn't played in as many big games and he hasn't led huge comebacks yet. But there was a here we go again feeling when things went bad for that offense last year. And again, I'm not blaming on one person or the other, but the combination of OC, combination of quarterback with a checkered history in those spots, I think those bad thoughts and bad feelings are out the window coming in.
Yeah, at least, I mean, like, Riley Leonard's had the Clemson game last year. But it was like not Sam Hartman versus Clemson. It was, him, and like I realized Clemson turned the ball over in a comical way, but still, Leonard proved to be very difficult for Clemson to defend with superior talent. So I think Riley. I think even the Notre Dame game, Leonard comes out. They're all over him at the beginning of that game. Throws the pick that Watts, steps in front of. Not a good throw. And then, has some accuracy issues maybe in the second quarter, but then settles in and gets the offense going. There was a time where, like in that game, where Notre Dame's defense was really on its heels, which is not something you said a lot about Notre Dame's defense last season, and certainly not against teams like Duke, where they were missing an NFL left tackle in the game. And their talent level is not close to what Notre Dame is, but I think Leonard handled himself pretty well. That was another thing. Chatting with Denbrock about Leonard, he said like tape of the Notre Dame Duke game last year was a real positive for Leonard's, his take on Leonard in terms of his competitiveness and ability to sort of get after it.
Well, the other thing I'd add, they played Florida State to a draw before he got hurt, and Florida State was so far and away the best team in the ACC and a playoff team.
He was hurt.
He was hurt.
Yeah. It was. They played him to a draw with Riley Leonard be hurt, and then once he was out. They couldn't keep up. I think that sort of grittiness, that's like the way Denbrock described it is like, if you've got that, like we'll get the other stuff. Like he's not concerned about that. And like, you're referencing Hartman last year, like what happened at Clemson and Louisville, that's like anti-grit. That what Leonard has is just something different. I think that's what Notre Dame's maybe most excited about with him.
And anti-grit. That's sounds like a really bad deodorant ad or something like that. I think we plan on going a half hour. We've gone over an hour so far. Thank you for adding all the questions. I don't have a whole lot to add. I would like to apologize to Beef Eater NDO8 for not getting all your work done today. We can give you a doctor's note or something if this is what's distracting you.
I want to say Chad Williams. I appreciate the dew point explanation in the comments too. Now I'm very in tune with dew point moving forward, thanks to Chad. So shout out you. This is what these live rooms are for. It's not for you to ask questions, it's for us to actually learn stuff in the comments.
We should ask our friends in Texas about dew point. I think it's a very rub some dirt on it and suck it up kind of state. So I don't know if that approach will work for Notre Dame, but learn something new every time we do these. Yeah.
Well, this was great. We should do more of these. We don't have any more practice availability at the extent we had it today, but I think, in the preseason, maybe setting a schedule. And I also want to say I appreciate the handful of people that sent me DMs of, I would totally go to your event in Houston. So that was good to hear too. Please continue to reach out on that. Sort of lets us figure out whether that makes sense to do it or not. It would be a lot of fun, whatever the format is. So we appreciate everyone who hopped in the chat today. Again, if you're interested in a live event in Houston, please let us know. Email, Twitter, however it is easiest to get in touch with us, that'd be great. But I think Matt and I will probably be back next week with another show. We've got access to both coordinators at the end of this week, Marty Biaggi as well on special teams. So plenty more to come here on The Independent as Notre Dame opens training camp on July 31st. Thanks for being with us on our live show and being with us here on The Independent.
I will add really quickly, Chad, that's not a shot. That was a compliment. 1, 2, the plan in season is to make the weekly midweek show a live show. We're working on the time and the organization behind all of that. So if you like this, we're glad. We're going to do much more of this season. But thank you all for joining us. I think I've worn out my welcome in Pete's chair, and we will see you next week on The Independent. Thanks, guys.